Hi, and welcome to All the Woo A to Z. We're your hosts, Suzanne.
And Mychal, and this is season 2. Hello, I'm Mychal, and I've been spending my last week at the mechanics. There we go.
And I'm Suzanne, and I have been spending the last week building the mental platform to live in this world.
And this is All the Woo,
A to Z.
and this is P for
Psy-ops.
Psy-ops. As always, we ask you to join us at our metaphorical table that is a real table, but nonetheless, where it's a non-judgmental space where we talk about our own experiences and understandings of these topics, and at the very least, hope that you are entertained.
And so just a little note about tonight that makes it super special.
Mhm.
The wind is gusting up to 47 miles per hour,
Yes.
and the wind chimes do little dances. And so you may hear all kinds of background noise that you don't normally hear
Yes.
because nature.
Nature wants to participate in this podcast.
So what are we drinking? It looks like it matches your nails.
It does. So tonight we are doing a psyops pairing we're going to have a gin and tonic. So we're not doing wine tonight. We're doing a cocktail and a pretty, traditional cocktail.
Ordinary.
But
Until you see it.
Until you see it. So what makes it not ordinary is that we are using Empress Gin, which is more of a blue color. And when the pH level is raised, it turns more kind of purple. And when the pH is lowered, so you add acid into it, it turns pink.
It's like a hydrangea.
Yeah. So if you were to look at it, you would have no idea that that's actually what we're drinking, that we are fooling you on what is in our glass. And there you are. We just psyops you in the very loosest, broadest
and tastiest
term.
way.
Yes.
So before we get started, actually we've already started, but when we say psyops, rather than give you a generic description, we are going to tell you a lot of the tools that psyops use.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of umbrellas here that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So, and these may be things that you notice are turning up more and more in the world.
Life. Yeah. Just in life right now.
So isolation, blame, overwhelm, accusations, especially ones that spin off into some sort of betrayal, infidelity, and or into you're crazy, you're possessed, you're a witch kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Distraction, gaslighting, misinformation, disinformation, half-truths, confusion, loss of anything that contributes to a loss of center, scapegoating, anonymous sources, manipulation, especially emotional, repetition, and loaded language.
Yes.
So some of these things could also be from a Mad Men episode.
True.
Because advertising does definitely use them. And almost all of them are in the CIA playbook for going and toppling other countries' governments.
Yes. So if you don't know what PSYOP stands for, it is a psychological operation is technically what it's shorthand for. And one of the reasons why we're talking about this
Why it's woo.
First of all, we're just also going to address the fact that oftentimes when people speak about PSYOPs, because of the natural military alignment there, that it's often thought of being a political thing. And we're going to once again say we're not a political show. That's not what we're going to be talking about here. One of the reasons why we are bringing it up, as we've already said, is that we're seeing it everywhere at all kind of levels in general. And there is a real woo component to it. And so another kind of connection with the woo overall of why we're talking about this is sometimes things that are really kind of woo are not really that far off the beaten path. They're not so extreme as being like a whole other version of science that we just don't understand. It's not always that extreme. Sometimes it's just
a different angle.
Psychology.
Yeah. And for a long time, psychology was considered basically witchcraft.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing is that what makes it woo is intention behind it. And when the intention is control, to remove power, to subjugate, to eliminate any kind of negative impact on people who do not know or would not contribute or cooperate, then it's just straight up coming down into dark magic.
Yeah. Basically. Yeah. It kind of comes into that realm of things, because that style of magic can employ all of those qualities, and then, add in talismans or whatever it is that you want into it, and then there you go too. Right? But it doesn't necessarily need to have that.
So we are talking about psyops as being the overarching umbrella, but underneath that, there are lots of different smaller umbrellas, but probably the most minute and personal one is the narcissistic relationship.
Yeah. Also, the one most talked about in recent years. I'd have to say that it's unfortunately thrown around a lot, of being a term that is now starting to maybe become overused. But if you are looking at it from a psychological standpoint of what qualifies something as narcissistic behavior, yeah, it's basically like a mini book of psyops, essentially.
And as Mychal and I have both had that experience, we just, it's one of those things that once you have smelled it, once you've gotten that sniff, you recognize it wherever it may be.
It's very distinct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Putrid and distinct.
Yeah.
So as we are looking around and seeing it everywhere, we thought this was a good time to talk about not only what these tools are, but also how to defend yourself against them.
Yeah.
And I think maybe the first defense is realizing you need a defense.
Yes. In general, kind of identifying that something's going on. The best way to battle any kind of darkness is to shine light on it, essentially, to demystify and to kind of see how it operates is one of the first things that you can do in order to understand and protect yourself.
One of the rules of magic in ancient Egypt was you named something. Yes. And if you could name something, that's when you had control over it, which was kind of how the Egyptian gods were stymied by the Hebrew God, because his name was I am that I am that I am that I am that I am into infinity. And it was kind of like, we were hoping for Bob, but okay.
Maybe George, something simple we can do elaborate.
We could make a talisman of it. That one, we just don't. The infinity part gets us.
Yeah.
So, but those kinds of things. So to be aware, and as you and I have discussed, it just seems like in this world, this is not the world that we grew up in. This is not the world that we lived in the past 10 years.
Yeah.
Like, things have significantly changed. And I think some of the most powerful tools are overwhelm.
Yes.
Because, again, as we've discussed, we were brought up with the idea that a responsible citizen, part of the adulting process was to be aware of what's going on in the world. And if you try to even capture what's going on in one country anymore, it's
really difficult.
Yeah.
We were talking a little bit about this, big surprise, a little bit before we started to record. And one of the things that it kind of reminded me of is I don't know, this is secondhand information to me, so I don't know how factual this is, but it's my understanding, let's just put it that way, that in Australia now, that a lot of the news stations have been reclassified as no longer being news, but as being entertainment, which is a really interesting classification, because then it kind of tells you the quality of, because Suzanne, not to out you in this, but you used to be
journalist. That was my training.
Yeah, a news journalist, basically. Yes. So, and there's rules, right, to how you're supposed to report, and that you have so many sources, and that you have to have
deal with things called facts,
right,
which are things that actually happened.
Yes,
as opposed to just
interpretations.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot, and so if you pull away, let's say, from that idea, then it really does become more entertainment than it does anything for anybody to really rely on that information, which is,
it becomes Bridgerton.
Yeah, and it becomes really, really hard to kind of identify what's real, right, or what's true.
And I think the part of that is, the more in a narcissistic relationship, in this kind of spectrum that we're talking about, overwhelm is one of the tools, because when you get overwhelmed, you usually fall into some form of the fear response, which is, flight, fright. Keep getting these wrong.
Fight or flight.
Fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. And so you become incapable of acting.
Yeah.
And I think another component of that is when you go into fear mode, you're literally, physically, your vision narrows to such a degree that when somebody's like, you have two choices and you have to decide right now, that you just impulsively, you can't see it, but I'm doing a little impulsive
jump.
jolt.
Yeah. Like you are forced to make a decision. You accept those two decisions as being the only two decisions. You accept the information as it's being given to you. As somebody who is legitimately been diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, a lot of my experience, I'll just put it this, because I am not a psychologist or a psychiatrist in order to tell you from that perspective, but in my experience, a lot of the intrusive thoughts that you have really do incite some kind of fear, which is why then you then create some kind of behavior in order to combat the fear.
To feel safe.
To feel safe, which is why a lot of people will form like counting things. Like if I turn the light switch on and off so many times, then everything's going to be okay. Right? You have to find ways to pacify the fear for yourself. And the sad part there is that you're doing it to yourself. Nobody's doing it to you. But in this kind of situation that we're talking about, instead somebody's taking advantage of that and imposing fear on somebody, not necessarily somebody who's OCD, for anybody, right? That fear oftentimes puts blinders on somebody immediately. Yeah.
So for all of these things, as we have said with all other woo things, and the reason why, beyond the dark magic thing, the reason why these things are, I would say, all kind of affecting you on a spiritual, mental, emotional level is because they disconnect you from yourself. They disconnect you from the source within you. They disconnect you, make you second guess your own reality, your own experiences, your own sanity, like all of those different things. And that's an escalating kind of thing.
You can't even hear your voice anymore, really. Yeah.
Yeah. So they squelch the you that is this unique, once in an entire galaxy timeline creation, who is here to experience and do and live and be, and turn you into a battery. And so I think, as I've said before, the fundamental rule for me anyway of woo is there is a universe that if you ask, answers. And so to kind of have that phone ripped out of your hand and not even realize it because you are being distracted or being accused or being gaslit or any of those kinds of things. And so realizing that people who are doing this both on an advertising level and a CIA level and, an algorithm level and all of that, actually know what they're doing, and they do have an intention.
Yeah. It's not to say that all those people are bad. That's not what we're saying. But
they have an objective.
Yes.
And it may not be the objective that you want. And I'm pretty sure that nobody wants to just be forever scrolling.
Yeah.
And that is definitely designed to be as addictive as possible.
That's why a lot of people I know have stopped even just being on social media. Like they just don't even have social media accounts because they don't even know why they're scrolling. It's as if they're looking for something that they don't know what they're getting. It really does create some kind of chemical reaction in the brain. And so I know a lot of people who have actually stopped or limit at least their time on or whatever it is.
And that is an incredible amount of discipline. But I think the other thing is it's the scrolling that you do in your head after that.
Yeah.
Like how I'm not going to remember the scientist correctly, but he was talking about how the form of the thing that we do actually rewires our brain. And so
Joe Dispenza?
No, this was a science guy, not a metaphysical guy.
Okay.
But how the form of scrolling, the way that it's these short little bites and losing the ability to think long thoughts,
Yeah.
to read books. Obviously, I'm going to be concerned about that. So
you have a vested interest in that.
more readers. But that kind of thing. So, but I think it's fascinating that when you look at the narcissist playbook, which we're seeing played out, and
on a larger scale, in a lot of different ways, not just the
so
obvious
the one
connections.
that is probably closest, in my view, for whatever reason, is the
Yeah, I knew you were going to say it. Okay, so I'm going to give
Lively.
yes, no, Blake Lively. So Suzanne, every time she's been saying this, listeners, recently in the past couple days, she keeps on saying Blithely as
Lively.
she's created a new name for
Lively.
for
Lively and Baldoni.
Yes.
Lively v. Baldoni. But that, if you look at it from a historical point of view, these are exactly the accusations that both the Romans foisted on Cleopatra and that Henry VIII foisted on Anne Boleyn, which was first infidelity, betrayal, something like that.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is you're crazy, you're dangerous, you're a witch. And it was sometime this week that, they were saying that they wanted to talk to his 5 mistresses and 5 therapists. And it was just like,
what?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
It was, but that it's a flip of the male female dynamic.
Yeah.
Or
the traditionally accepted version of it. Yeah. Which just goes to show it can happen either way.
Yeah. So, but again, this is one of the ways that we're seeing this.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah. Sorry. I was just thinking about my egg thing and trying to figure out, I'm like, this fits somehow, but my brain's not working on
Well, we were just talking about the overwhelm. Like you can't even responsibly, she said with quotation marks, go to the grocery store without it being, I'm voting with my dollar and I'm, voting buying in alignment with my ethics and all this kind of stuff. And so, it requires research and soul searching, and you were talking about it.
Yeah, like it was like, this is another way outside of it just being like a political thing that I was kind of talking about before we started to record, was how we're seeing it just in simply food. And that's what I mean. Like, it's not necessarily always political or politically charged, or
it's just a cultural thing that's going on everywhere.
And so with food, I was just laughing because there was an Instagram post talking about social media, full circle. Okay. There we go. Where I thought it was hilarious because it's a short little video. It's simple as like, when did going to the grocery store become an existential crisis? Where it's like you stand there wondering what level of happiness of chicken eggs you can afford when you're at the store. And it's true, right? It's like, okay, well, and everybody has a different budget. And so it also becomes overwhelming for a lot of people who may they maybe know that eating healthier requires buying certain kinds of things, and to what level or degree do you want to do that to? But it's not just want, it's also what you can afford, right? And so then there becomes this battle between, in your mind, what becomes my health, right, versus what I can financially afford in order to support that. And then maybe potentially guilt that's put in there. It becomes this whole other thing where going to a grocery store, it's like buying an apple is no longer just buying an apple anymore.
Yeah. Am I going with the non-GMO small farmer who is, trying to do artisanal apples versus the GMO who has, now copywritten the DNA of the apple. So if it accidentally, you drop a seed in your backyard and grow an apple tree, they're coming for you.
Yeah. Did I go to the farmer's market and get this directly from the farmer? Or did I go to a major grocery store and where I've been told that apparently all the organic produce there is not truly organic and is like all the different things? You're like, it's just so many different, it's overwhelming.
But then I think the other, one of the other big things is the isolation of, I don't know who else believes like me. I don't know where I can go and have any relief. I'm, maybe disenfranchised from my family because there's 95 topics we can't talk about.
Right.
I don't know anything about that. Or, all of the other ways at work, I need to keep my head down kind of thing because I don't know. And it can all be inflammatory.
Yeah.
And so I
And
think
then
that's what
yeah.
leads to scrolling at 3 o'clock in the morning, she said, not pointing her finger at herself.
Well, yeah, it's like, where do you stand in all of this, right? What is the majority? And the thing is, you can't actually get a proper pulse on what the majority of people think, because probably a lot of people are like you,
Yeah, exactly.
and where they're not truly feeling comfortable to voice. And for those people who do feel comfortable to voice, is that really the commonality? Like, is that the majority? It's hard to say. It's really hard to kind of gauge where you fall and all that, which is really unfortunate.
So I think the best advice that we can give you for psyops
Hmm.
is, and I have started doing this as my own practice, is just, when your watch goes off to remind you to walk around or drink water or whatever it is. And if you don't have a watch, you have a phone or you have some device that reminds you to do something like
Yeah.
once an hour, is just check in with yourself and ask you, okay, what part of me is being activated now?
Hmm.
Am I in fear? Am I in flow? Am I excited? Am I scared? Am I, hesitant? Am I cringing? Am I wincing?
Yeah.
Like all of those things. And then what is the source of that?
Hmm.
Is that something outside of me? Is it something inside of me? If it's something inside of me, is it something that came from outside of me?
Yeah. I think it's kind of, what is the book, The Power of Now
Mm-hmm.
by Eckhart Tolle. And that's a lot of what it is, of some very similar kind of idea, right? Of like, am I okay right now? Like, in
Mm-hmm.
this moment, not worried about the past, not worried about the future. Like, right now, how am I right now,
Mm-hmm.
without any other influences? Kind of,
Am I
yeah,
safe? Do I have coffee?
yes. Am I reasonably comfortable sitting in my chair right now in this moment? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I filled in the blank there, but
But yeah, those kinds of things. And I think that's probably the best, that, and I will list these tools that are used in the notes.
Mhm.
But yeah, just keeping an eye out for what's happening, but not letting it influence your internal communication.
Yeah. And again, the whole reason why we're talking about this now is not just because it's happening everywhere and at all levels of all things, really, but that the woo connection there is that it's really another form of basically kind of dark magic,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's why we decided to talk on it, is exactly for that reason. So
Yeah, the repetitive words, the loaded language, you might know that under the term spell.
yes, yes,
And
AKA.
we are hearing constant spells. We are spelling ourselves,
Hmm.
because the beautiful thing about your brain is it doesn't know that what you're telling it isn't real or
Yeah,
isn't true.
yeah,
And so, yeah, be connected and be careful.
yeah. As we've said in many other episodes, words are very powerful. What you say is very powerful. Words are spells, not just what you say, but what you hear, all the things. So just, keep all of that in mind.
So, shall we pick the
Yes.
next letter?
Next letter. All right. Let it be a good letter. It is B.
Normal.
B is in bzz, B.
Yeah, I don't know. That's going to take a minute.
I know. We're going to have to settle on a topic. Okay.
So, thanks for joining us once again.
And we'll see you next time on All the Woo.
A to Z.